heart's eyes to see them, and lips that we might tell how great is the Almighty, who has made all things well, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful. 'Twas God that made them all.
We'll just wait for these people to come in and settle down, but I do ask you to check that your phones are on silent, please. Good afternoon. I'm Sandy Carden, celebrant and an elder at this church, and I'm honoured to join with you all as we celebrate the life of Maureen Jean EARDLEY-WILMOT. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Maureen, but I've been introduced to many aspects of her life from her good friend Colleen Booker, who's worked tirelessly to bring this service together. Thank you, Colleen. We welcome you all to Maureen's memorial service today and appreciate that you've put this time aside to remember and pay tribute to Maureen, who's been so influential in the lives of so many people here and further afield. Others will watch this service by live stream from other parts of New Zealand and further afield. And we greet you and feel warmed by the knowledge that you share our grief in Maureen's passing and also celebrate all she has brought to your lives. In particular, we think of Maureen's sister, Eileen, in the UK, and her daughter Jackie and son Paul. They live close to where Maureen grew up. We offer our condolences to you all, and also to Catherine, Maureen's stepdaughter, who's flown all night to be here today, and we think of your family in Perth, Catherine. In this time of remembrance, we admire Maureen's qualities of leadership, dedication to the people she loved and cared about, and the institutions she served with vigour and generosity. Her artistry and her hospitality were well known, and she often entertained in the garden that she tended lovingly in Fernglen Road. Maureen made a positive impact on the lives of those who knew her, and you have in turn enriched and blessed her. Brian, Maureen's husband of 42 years, died in March this year, and this has been a time of great sadness and adjustment for Maureen. She was buried in the same plot as Brian earlier this week. We will hear from many who knew Maureen well through many aspects of her life. But first of all, I'd like to read a message from her niece, Jackie O'Neill, in the UK. Jackie says, "My Auntie Maureen was a special lady. When I was a little girl, living in a small village in the UK, Maureen lived in the Bahamas, and I was mesmerised that my auntie lived in such an exotic place, and I marvelled at her exciting life. She was an inspiration to me, even at such a young age. When Maureen moved to New Zealand, I was determined to visit her. She gave me the dreams and aspirations to see the world, and so I did. I joined the airline industry, and at the age of 24, I was on a plane to New Zealand. I spent 3 months with Maureen and Brian and had the most wonderful time. Distance was no barrier, though, and it didn't stop us getting together. I myself moved abroad with my husband and children, and Maureen and Brian came out to Brunei and Kuala Lumpur, and I will always cherish those happy memories. Although the miles were vast, we stayed in contact, and I can honestly say that my life was influenced by Auntie Maureen. I last saw her when I came out to New Zealand in 2015, and it was always my intention to come back to New Zealand after the borders opened after the pandemic. Her untimely death has come as a great shock, and I still can't believe that I will never see her again. It was Auntie Maureen who gave me that ambition to travel and see the world, and she was my amazing, talented, inspirational auntie, and I will miss her dreadfully, as will my family, my mother, Eileen, and my brother, Paul. Thank you, Jackie. Now we'll hear from Catherine, who's Maureen's stepdaughter.
Hello again. Some of you I saw 6 months ago. Here we are again. Okay. Excuse these notes. Can you hear me? I've been told I have to speak properly and slowly. Okay. Colleen gave me a brief overview of all the areas that Maureen's been involved with. I didn't even know half of these things. She was an amazing woman. So I'm just going to go through a few things. Maureen came from humble beginnings, and this endearing quality stayed with her until the end. The sliding doors event that changed her life forever, from a council house to eventually enjoying the views of St Helier, was winning a scholarship to a prestigious school in the UK, proving once and for all talent bubbles to the surface. Of course, there were a lot of hard yards along the way. She never took anything for granted. She worked hard, defining that Kiwi work ethic. So from a council house in the northern UK to overlooking Rangitoto in New Zealand. This was some journey. Her intelligence and warmth and friendly nature no doubt helping her along the way. She arrived here in the 70s via teaching in the Bahamas for 8 years. She obtained an MA in Honours in psychology at Auckland Uni. She discovered acting and directing and Brian at the Maidment Theatre, which began a 47-year relationship, married for 42. She also dabbled a little bit in politics, I hear. Later elected vice president of Auckland Central National Party. She then went on to become secretary of the Women's Division. No mean feat, because in those days the Minister for Women was a man. So, go Maureen. If that wasn't enough, she became a JP, ensuring for the rest of her life there'd always be someone at her door wanting her advice or signature. Brian and Maureen were married in 1980. Although it's sad, it doesn't surprise me that Maureen died not long after Brian. They completed and complemented each other. They were a great team, and eventually I believe Maureen simply couldn't live without him. And if things were the other way around, I'm sure the outcome would have been the same. It was her cleverness and business acumen that led the way. Brian and Maureen started their IT business in 1985, and she was the perfect sidekick. She would quietly and efficiently run the back room so the front room would shine. Often a thankless task, but she never complained. And Brian knew full well that their success was a result of both their efforts. Running alongside all of this business activity were numerous society memberships and leadership roles. The list is endless, always giving, contributing and mentoring. A member of the Institute of Directors, Unitech ID Advisory Committee, she became president of the BPW Club, a society for the advancement of women in business. I had to look that up. And I was delighted to see that Maureen's face is still on the webpage. So, go Maureen. She was a treasurer of UNIFEM and president of Asia Pacific EBIS. If there was an organisation out there needing help, she was on it, always giving her time and energy. And any time she had left over, that wasn't much, she spent in her garden. She was also an avid painter. Unfortunately, we don't have any to show you because they're in storage, and also a keen photographer. We found the cameras, so we're going to find the photos shortly. Okay, excuse this. I won't change my mind a little bit. There it is. No, there it is. Okay. Maureen was a dedicated and attentive wife, business partner, and eventually a carer for my father. As I met her as a young adult, we were lucky enough to have a relationship as two people, not as a stepmother and a stepdaughter trying to forge the way together. She didn't need to parent me at all, and I didn't think of her as a mean mother. She was the perfect second wife for my father. She supported him endlessly, and he her. He was very, very lucky to have had her. We were fortunate enough to see Brian and Maureen very regularly, as they always made the effort to visit us wherever we were. Like Jackie, we actually never lived in New Zealand. We've lived everywhere, and at least once or every 2 years they would make the trek to visit us. I've been back to New Zealand many times this year, and watching her more recently handling life by itself was very hard. A big house, a massive house, with a tricky sale to sort, and the sudden passing of Brian was not easy. Thankfully, she's had some pretty amazing friends through all this time. I personally, Colleen and Adrian, that banded together and have really got that house ready to sell, and more than anything have been supportive and helpful to her. This is testament to her character that she attracted such beautiful friends. I enjoyed my last few visits here, which was just me and her. I got to know and understand the real Maureen, not Brian's wife. An extremely bright, intelligent, organised woman. I wish we'd had more time. We should have had more time. But as I said, she missed Brian terribly eventually, and I think she decided that being with him was what she wanted most of all. So I'm happy she's at rest and peace with her life partner. We've all lost a unique human being. She'll be sorely missed. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Catherine. Very comprehensive and moving testimony. I see that you didn't say that she left a pet tortoise resident in the pond. Must know that. We're going to listen to some music now. Morning has broken. And while we do so, I encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with Maureen and say in your hearts anything you might wish you had said to her while she was alive. So let us have the music, and then after that, there will be an opportunity for others to share their memories, Pauline, Tony, and others who might like to say a few words. So first, we'll have the music. Thank you.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet passed. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. Morning has broken like the first morning, blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the world.
Could I invite Anne Todd Lambie to come and speak, please? Anne's going to speak about Maureen's involvement in the business and professional women.
Good afternoon, and particularly condolences to Maureen's family that we've heard from today in the UK and who I understand are joining us. I like to think that this was a Kate Shepherd camellia because I know that Maureen won the suffrage medal and very much deserved that, and the Kate Shepherd camellia was one of the things that was specially grown at the time of the suffrage centenary. I am a life member of BPW New Zealand, Business and Professional Women, and a past president, and it's in this capacity I was asked to speak about Maureen's huge contribution to our organisation. And I am grateful for the input of other former BPW executive members, some of whom are here this afternoon, others of whom have offered their apologies and remembrances. Maureen joined BPW Auckland in 1992. Typically Maureen, the following year she was elected Vice President, and in 1995 became the club's president. She was very empathetic about people who were less able to speak for themselves, and with other members of BPW Auckland, established cooking and language classes for immigrants and refugees to assist their New Zealand integration. The program was so successful that they combined with Sharkdi, an organisation supporting especially Asian women experiencing domestic violence. As a result of that, a very helpful booklet was produced following workshops held at the Waipuna Hotel during an annual BPW conference. It was called Resettlement Issues for Refugee and Migrant Women. Following 2 years as chair of the BPW NZ Education Committee and then 2 years as vice president, Maureen was elected New Zealand president in 1999. During the presidency, she held executive meetings in her home, with Brian surprisingly preparing delicious lunches. During this time, surprising. During this time, Maureen raised the profile of the organisation through her links with Colleen Mills, the then Mayoress of Auckland, and a memorable appearance on morning TV with a makeover. She was delighted with Brian's response to the upmarketed Maureen. She accompanied another past president, Pauline Gapper, to Nepal on one of Pauline's extraordinary expeditions to deliver funds raised within our clubs to fund literacy programs managed by BPW Nepal members. These women would work all day and then walk 5 or 6 miles in the evening to and from the literacy classes. They were so greatly valued. There were also a coterie of New Zealand BPW members who loved knitting, and they also delivered some clothing to the young children in the preschools there run by BPW Nepal. In 1996, Maureen attended her first BPW International Congress in Vienna as a New Zealand delegate. To give you an indication of the size of the organisation, 107 countries were represented. This scarf, the colours of which I love and still frequently wear, were purchased on that trip. It wasn't all work. Maureen led the delegation to the BPW Vancouver conference, where BPW New Zealand had 7 resolutions passed into policy, a big workload for a president to manage, several of which into which Maureen had input. She also attended BPW congresses in Lucerne and Melbourne, and in Melbourne she led a workshop on dealing with domestic violence, became a member of the BPW International UN Committee, and its chair of violence against women. Maureen, being a child psychologist and having worked with families where there had been violence, it was a very appropriate role. And at the time, I was chair of BPW Oceania and invited her to be a keynote speaker at our seminar in Darwin, where the topic was violence against women. One of our other keynote speakers was a former Australian High Court judge, Norma Ford. The seminar was very successful, and there was a valuable exchange of strategies, particularly appreciated by the Papua New Guinea delegation. However, BPW seminars, conferences, and congresses are not all work. There are an awful lot of partying. And at the preceding BPW Australian Conference Gala dinner, we had our first taste of crocodile, ostrich, and kangaroo. Maureen also spoke at the BPW Asia regional meeting in the Cook Islands. She represented BPW New Zealand in several other roles. A trustee on the New Horizons for Women Trust. BPW was a key founder of this organisation, which provides funding to give mature women a second glance to gain a qualification. She and Brian graciously allowed their beautiful home and garden to be used for associated fundraisers, as they did to assist some other organisations, including, as I recollect, regular National Party garden parties. Maureen also was our representative at the APEC Women Leaders Network meeting in Wellington. And one of her most memorable experiences was in 2003, when she attended the 47th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, held in New York. Although initially attending as a BPW representative, the government, I think a national government, invited Maureen to be a government delegate, and she was able to attend sessions on the floor of the UN and be part of combined discussions with Japan, the United States, Canada, and Australia, JustCans, for those of you who know about our international obligations. While in New York, Maureen also attended NGO functions and gave workshops on best practice for controlling domestic violence. We've heard about her work life, and in 2004, Maureen was selected to attend the APEC EBIS training in Sukmyung Women's University in Seoul in South Korea. This was a joint venture between APEC and BPW International for women who had their own businesses in the IT field. She graduated the course and was then elected president of Asia Pacific Women's EBIS Alumni. During her long membership of BPW, Maureen worked on many things and very closely with me for the introduction of the Property Relationships Act. And during our lobbying, we were very grateful for her National Party contacts. She also worked on legal rights for the attended events for EEO Trust Awards and UNIFEM, assisted Sharkey, and provided input into the Working Women's Resource Centre. She always kept herself informed about the Human Rights Commission. I didn't make Brian's funeral, but shortly after his death, Maureen and I spent an afternoon together and had a wonderful, wide-ranging discussion. She wasn't well, but she was still in her own home and thinking ahead to how her life would be, very sadly, without Brian. We talked about how little domestic violence issues had changed despite the work of women of our generation, and both being concerned as to whether more women would maybe potentially negatively affected by the proposed changes to the Property Relationships Act. Maureen was renowned throughout BPW New Zealand for her correction of grammar, commas and apostrophes, especially during resolution debates at conferences. She was an expert at this. She was a BPW taonga, gentle and genuine, with a great sense of humour and excellent mimicry. She fully deserved receiving the BP Badge of Honour in 2017. It's been raised, but finally on behalf of BPW, I would like to acknowledge the unstinting support of Colin Brooker and Adrian Grogan for Maureen over recent years. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Could Pauline Rundle come, please, to tell us more about Maureen?
Good afternoon, everybody. I knew Maureen as a friend. Maureen, Jean, EARDLEY-WILMOT, née Huddleston, known to us through her husband as Huddles. Brian and Maureen were my friend for nearly 60 years. My late husband and I met Brian at a party one time when Maureen was overseas on one of her many meetings. The four of us enjoyed each other's company, and so from that time we were often invited to have dinner with them, or they would come to Castor Bay to have dinner with us. And I did notice at the time that each time they arrived, it seemed to be in a different car. Cars being one of Brian's interests. At the time, they lived on Herald Island. It was a small, nice little house, and Maureen asked me if I could take my sewing machine over there one time and make their curtains, which of course I did. And life continued like that. And one time we invited Brian and Maureen and asked them if they would like to visit us at our little family fibrelite batch in Coromandel. They were very keen. I did explain the circumstances of the life there to them, And if you know Brian, this may come as a surprise, but it was cold showers and a long drop. And yet he coped. The three of us would go fishing. Maureen wasn't that keen on boats, so she stayed ashore and did watercolour landscapes, of which she was very pleased or proud. One day we were invited by Brian to come to dinner, and he said mysteriously, "But not Herald Island. We have moved to St Heliers." And moved they had. And if you never had a chance to go inside their magnificent house, I'm afraid you have really missed a treat. Maureen was very proud of it. The house was full of amazing antiques, pottery, Graham Storm particularly, artworks, all sorts of things, first editions, many, many things. And Maureen loved her garden. She used to be a bit annoyed with the birds when they didn't use her bird bath but found puddles to drink from. Maureen wasn't that good at doing what Brian wanted if she didn't feel like it, although to the rest of the world she was the most obedient, and she most certainly was the most caring and loving wife he could have had. She was a real treasure. They came often to Free China Society, Taiwan functions. My husband Stuart was the president, and they really enjoyed the different banquets. Of course, with Maureen's position, they always came as honoured guests, along with other local dignitaries and many councillors. She was a real friend. We were able to relax together and enjoy each other's company, and I miss them both enormously. Thank you.
Tony Miller will address us now. And then, if anyone else would like to make a contribution, you're welcome to do so briefly.
It is an honour to speak on Maureen's tenacious and hugely significant contribution to the National Party. I've known Maureen for 40 years within our local St Heliers community and the Tamaki electorate, the National Party, NCW, and as a local Justice of the Peace. She was our St Heliers JP Hub coordinator for many years and would ring me and remind me that I had to be there the next day. Many of those who have known and worked with Maureen in the National Party are here today, and many more have been unable to attend. Apologies and condolences to Maureen's family have been expressed by the Honourable Judith Collins, Honourable Scott Simpson, Todd Muller, Anna Casey, Alistair Bell, and Jan Brown. Maureen founded the Dame Hilda Ross Trust to support National Party women to stand up and serve in all levels of local and central government. The Honourable Louise Upston, Chair of the Dame Hilda Ross Trust, is here with us today, I believe. Yes, oh, hi, sorry, Louise. This trust continues to have a significant impact on women in National. Thank you. Our local Member of Parliament for Tamaki, Simon O'Connor, who has had a close association with Maureen, is also present, as are Sylvia Wood, our President of the National Party, and past President Peter Goodfellow, Councillor Desley Simpson, and Beverly Revel, Secretary of the Women's Advisory Group. She was the founder of the Women for National campaign, with badges sold for $4 back in the 1980s to raise our profile and, of course, never wanting to miss an opportunity, to fundraise. Jean Allen wears her badge today. Maureen fiercely advocated for women at every opportunity, constantly challenging the party to increase the number of women office holders and increase the number of women candidates. especially in safe seats. It was her opinion that the lack of women in these roles in 1984 meant National was not truly a national party. It was not representative of our nation. And she let it be known. Maureen's activities in National included 1978, the first woman to chair a National held electorate, Helensville. 1983, elected a Dominion councillor, the National Executive of the New Zealand National Party. 1984, National Party candidate for Auckland Central. 1987 to 1993, elected National Party Woman Vice President. Now, this was the only position apart from the President to be elected by the full conference by everybody. In this role, she represented the party at the International Democrat Union, the IDU, and the Pacific Democrat Union, PDU, meetings in Fiji, Canada, Norway, United States, England, Austria, Greece, and Spain. Very busy. She also instigated and planned a PDU-IDU meeting in New Zealand. In 1989, she attended the inauguration of George H.W. Bush. 1990, observed the first Round Table Europe, with all East European countries to be present in Vienna. 1991, addressed a World Freedom Day rally in Taipei. 1988 to 1991, she frequently chaired the Party Policy Coordinating Committee and was on the Campaign Planning Committee. Coordinated divisional women's committees and women's sections with representatives from each electorate. Represented the National Party on the National Council of Women, NCW. Organised skills training and policy seminars, including ones held annually the day before the National Conference, upskilling the party on issues of women's health, women in power, achieving women, and violence against women. So these themes continue, obviously. Maureen truly has been a personal mentor and an inspiration. As an MP said this week to me, Maureen was definitely a force to be reckoned with, someone you really took notice of. Thank you, and thank you to Maureen.
Thank you, Tony. As we've heard already, Maureen's been a truly inspirational person, both in her private life, her business life, and in her wide-ranging work for many institutions and charities she supported. There may be another anecdote or two that hasn't been covered in what has already been said, and if so, I invite you to come now and share that with us. No, you will need to be up here. Excuse me. They won't be able to hear you on the live stream if you're...
Hi, my name's Liz. I just want to tell you a little story that, you all know how inspirational Maureen is. I met her just after she'd met Brian, and I'd just met my now husband. And at the time I was in quite an abusive relationship, and I eventually got around to leaving that. And Brian had just met Maureen, and they were in a little wee flat in Birkenhead that had an apartment that had a big pool outside that belonged to the apartment block. And I turned up there one night with my bag, because I just had to get out, and Les was away, so I knew he wasn't there to go to. I knew that where Brian and Maureen, I'd just met them briefly. So I turned up on their doorstep with my bag, crying my eyes out. And Brian said, come in. And so I went in and I said, where's Maureen? Oh, she's at university. Okay, so he proceeded to fill me up with whiskey. Now, I don't like whiskey, but that's how traumatised I was that night. I drank so much whiskey, I kind of slumped in a dead heap. When Maureen came home, and she looked at me and she went, and who's that? And Brian said, oh, well, it's actually Les's friend. Oh. So that's how I met Maureen, and she was just the most wonderful person. You know, eventually she got over the shock of this dead drunk woman sitting or lying in her house, and we were very good friends and shared some lots of times through Mairangi Players, and the guys down there remember that, and their house at Herald Island and their bigger house at Herald Island, and the fireplace that we built at Herald Island that actually, when they'd finished, they remembered they hadn't put anything to hold it to the wall, so I wonder if it's still there. But thanks, Maureen, because it was so much fun knowing you, and you are very inspirational.
Is there anyone else who has anything to share? Yes?
We've heard a lot about Maureen and her work for women and her work for the National Party. As an ex-Labor man and a male, I just wish she was on our side.
Is anyone sitting on the edge of their seat thinking they might come and share something with us? Shall we have the reading but from... No? Good. Come on up.
Not planning to say anything today, so I have nothing prepared, and I'll keep it brief as you asked, but the reason I wasn't going to make a speech today is because those of you that heard me speak at Brian's funeral, the speech I made then I could repeat today and it would be exactly the same. And the point I want to make there, the name Brian Moore was perfect. They were 1 and 1 makes 3, they were totally equal in everything they did, and they had a great life together. And I think what you said, Catherine, is she probably died, you know, it's a cliche, died of a broken heart, but clearly she missed Brian immensely. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm not going to repeat that speech, which was about 20 minutes long, but thank you very much, and that's it.
If anyone else would like to contribute anything, we'd be pleased to hear from you. Well, shall we have the reading then by Adrian Grogan, God's Garden by Helen Steiner Rice.
Thank you. And I did check. Toshi the tortoise is there. He poked his head up this morning and sort of said hello as I went to check on him. So he knew what was happening today. This is God's garden. It's very apt for Maureen. God looked around his garden and found an empty place. He then looked down upon the earth and saw your tired face. He put his arms around you and lifted you to rest. God's garden must be beautiful. He always takes the best. He knew that you were suffering. He knew that you were in pain. He knew that you would never get well on earth again. He saw the road was getting rough and the hills were hard to climb. So he closed your weary eyelids and whispered, "Peace be thine." It broke our hearts to lose you, but you did not go alone.
for part of us went with you the day God called you home. Okay.
Thank you, Adrian. Would you join now, please, in the closing hymn, Abide With Me? Please stand to sing.
With me, fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless,
Thank you. Please be seated. As we come to this end of this time of remembering and celebrating all that Maureen has been and indeed continues to be as she lives on in our hearts and memories, let us give thanks for all the richness and warmth and blessing of her life and love. We give thanks that we have been blessed to know and love and admire Maureen over many years, and we give thanks for her wisdom, strength, humour, benevolence and love shown to so many over her long and eventful life. Maureen has shown so much initiative, care and support to everything she's been involved in, and she was always trying to make things better for people. In turn, we are grateful for the people and events that have brought her joy and satisfaction and fulfilment, especially her beloved husband Brian and her sister Eileen, Jackie and Paul, Catherine and her family, and her many friends who have known her love and encouraged and enjoyed Maureen in her lifetime. As we take our final farewell of Maureen at this time, we pray that we will know comfort and peace as we continue our own lives, and may we take into our daily tasks those qualities we loved and admired in Maureen. We are grateful that we could gather to celebrate her life today, and we will continue to share our memories of her over refreshments as we leave this sanctuary. Thank you again for coming to share in this memorial to Maureen. Let us stand and say together the Lord's Prayer, after which we'll leave the chapel while listening to one of Maureen's favourite pieces of music, Beethoven's first piano concerto, recorded at St. Martin in the Fields. Let us say together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Thank you.